It's easy for people to forget or to not ever realize that abusive relationships don't come with big warning signs or labels on them. We don't normally go into an abusive relationship having any idea that it is actually an abusive relationship. And for narcissistic or emotional abuse, especially, this abuse can really sneak up on us when we're in the relationship and sneak up on us in ways that we don't see it. We don't realize that we're in an abusive relationship because this type of abuse requires lies, confusions, misunderstandings, misperceptions, wrong assumptions. It requires us to see it as something that it is not. So narcissistic abuse starts out looking like something that it's not. And there's a big gap between our original assumptions and the reality of what it is, and the journey that it takes between those two places, the journey that a victim has to go on between assuming that they're in a loving, trustworthy relationship and realizing that they're with somebody who's actually actively destroying them. And in today's video, I want to explain how a normal, intelligent person can get sucked into this type of a relationship, and how narcissists use tactics that exploit normal human psychology and that can cause the most intelligent, strongest people among us to get sucked into these relationships without ever even realizing what's happening. Welcome to Looking Behind the Mirror, where we explore narcissism and take our lives back as we make sense out of nonsense. As a quick disclaimer, everything I say is based on my opinions and my personal experiences. I'm not a professional, and if you're really struggling, I encourage you to seek professional help. I am providing links below for you. As I alluded to in the introduction, the first step to getting sucked into a narcissistically abusive relationship is to believe that it's something that it's not. When we first enter into these relationships, we establish beliefs. The narcissist or abusive person does not present themselves as who they really are. They are not honest about their intentions or how they really feel. And not realizing that seemingly normal people can lie or misrepresent themselves about such important things, we can often go into these relationships trusting what we're being told. So we believe that this person loves us, and we believe that we can trust this person. These are two really, really important elements that form the foundation of an abusive relationship that keep us stuck in it and keep us unable to see it for what it really is. When we believe that somebody loves us and we believe that we can trust this person, those first signs of abuse that start to creep into the relationship can be really, really hard for us to see realistically. And we can turn a blind eye to them through several different methods. We can justify the actions of the abuser, make excuses for them. We can be in denial, just plain denial that abuse is even possible in this relationship. We can just refuse to see reality for what it is. And we can blame ourselves, which is something that the abuser is going to really encourage us to do and trick us and gaslight us into doing. So when we're justifying the abuse, we're going to say things to ourselves like, well, they're really stressed out. They're having a bad day and nobody's perfect. I mean, everybody's allowed to lose their temper every now and then, right? And because we believe that this person loves us and that we can trust them, we're going to say things to ourselves like, I know this person's really great most of the time. I know that this is just a strange aberration of their character. This isn't really what they're like. They're really a great, loving, wonderful person that I can trust. So I can't really make sense out of what's happening in this weird episode right now, but I know I can trust this person. Therefore, this couldn't possibly be a serious red flag that I need to pay attention to. Using these same beliefs, we can say things to ourselves like, I know they don't really mean it. I mean, they love me and I trust them, right? So when they insult me and tell me that I'm a horrible person or that I never do anything right or that they're really miserable with me or I'm making them miserable, they couldn't possibly mean that because I already know that they love me and that I can trust them. So I don't understand why they're saying these things. They must just be having a bad day. Or they must not understand how much they're hurting me. That's another thing that we can say to ourselves to justify an abuser's behavior, because we believe they love us. So if they knew how much their behavior was hurting us, they would stop, right? So a lot of us can get stuck in this cycle of endlessly, desperately trying to explain to an abusive person how much their behavior is hurting us, thinking that if they could just understand, they would stop. I know they would stop because I know they love me and I know I can trust them. Therefore, if I could just make them understand how hurtful their behavior is, this would all go away. This isn't abuse. This is just a misunderstanding. Another thing we can do to justify an abuser's behavior is to balance it out somehow with all the nice things they do, the good things they do. Like, okay, yes, this person yelled at me all night long for not cleaning the counter the right way, but they came and helped me with a flat tire last month when I really needed them. So, I mean, they're really a really good, helpful person, right? They just lost their head for a bit. They were just in a bad mood. But really, they're really wonderful and they really do so much for me. So it's okay if they treat me like crap every now and then. And this can keep us from seeing the abuse if we have this idea in our head that abusive people are terrible all the time, that an abusive person would never come and help us with a flat tire because only good people would come and help us out when we need help, right? So this couldn't possibly be abuse because this person does helpful things for me sometimes. And this can lead into another way that we can prevent ourselves from seeing abuse for what it is, and that is just being in denial. Now, this is closely related to justifying an abuser's behavior, but it's being in denial of the abuse itself. Instead of justifying it, we are just not seeing it for what it is at all. One big reason that we can be in denial is because we, quote, we know we're with somebody that loves us, someone we can trust, right? So this couldn't possibly be abuse. And many of us see abuse as something that happens to other people. We ourselves, we couldn't possibly be in an abusive relationship. That can't possibly be what this is. And this denial can really be helped along when we don't understand what abuse looks like. When we have this idea in our head of something we saw in a movie once about some guy, of course, that's just always angry, always raging, always being physically violent for no reason. And when that's not what our relationship looks like, we don't see the abuse for what it is. And of course, if we're a man being abused in a relationship, we don't even have any stereotype of what that kind of abuse would look like. So that would be even harder for us to identify ourselves as being in an abusive relationship. Another reason that abuse victims can remain in denial, of course, they don't want to believe they're in an abusive relationship. Nobody wants to believe that. And it's just too easy to say, well, this is just one bad day, or things are usually just fine, or I'm making a big deal out of nothing, because that's often a message that the abuser is going to convince the abuse victim of, that they make a big deal out of nothing, when the abuser is usually the one who's actually making a really big deal out of nothing. And of course, there are cliches that we hear in society that seem to fit our reality that we don't really understand, don't really apply to us. But because we're in the middle of this relationship, we really don't have any way to build any kind of concept for what these cliches actually mean and actually look like in real life. Cliches like nobody's perfect, right? Or relationships take work. You're not supposed to be in bliss every single day. Relationships have ups and downs. They have hard times and good times. And so when you're in an abusive relationship, it's easy to just apply these cliches to your relationship and say to yourself, right, nobody's perfect. We're not going to be happy every single day. We're going to go through hard times and problems. But when you're in an abusive relationship, you're with somebody who's actively hurting you and harming you. And that is not the same thing as going through a tough time together. And that's not the same thing as saying nobody's perfect, because, I mean, there's a limit to the idea of nobody's perfect, because nobody's perfect. We're accountable for the things we do, and your partner in life, or whoever this person is, this relationship that you have, they're accountable for the way they treat you. Denial of abuse has us whitewashing everything with these cliches of nobody's perfect, I can't expect to be happy every single day. Basically, I have no right to complain because there is no space between perfection and an abusive, miserable, destructive relationship. There's no in between. It's one or the other. And I can't expect perfection. Therefore, there is no limit to what I will accept and excuse as simply not perfect. And in my opinion, the most powerful way that abuse hides itself from the abuse victim is through self-blame, through the victim blaming themselves for the abuse. And I think for people that haven't gone through emotionally abusive relationships, this can be really hard to understand because people that haven't been through it can't really picture what this looks like. I think that maybe there might be this vision of some monster that's just terrible 24/7, that's just breaking things and throwing raging fits and insulting you and just being a horrible, awful person 24/7, and then the victim somehow thinks that it's all their fault. Like, oh, this person is acting like a maniac 24/7 because of me, because I deserve it. And I think this creates this misconception that an abuse victim that blames themselves for the abuse just has extreme confidence issues, is completely disconnected from reality, and it helps people that haven't been through this to think, oh, well, that could never happen to me. I could never be that disconnected from reality. But what a victim blaming themselves really looks like is something that is a lot easier for most people to fall into without realizing it. Remember, you're in a relationship with somebody that you trust, somebody that you believe loves you because that was established in the beginning of the relationship, and you haven't gotten to the point yet where you've run into something that's really forced you to question that. You believe that with every ounce of your being, and you've committed to the relationship with this person with those beliefs that you are emotionally invested in. So if somebody that you love, that you believe loves you, somebody that you trust is insulting you, raging at you, throwing a fit, calling you names, you're going to assume that you must have done something to upset them. I mean, why would somebody that you trust and somebody that loves you become that upset and just start raging at you or calmly explaining to you how terrible you are and how much you've upset and ruined everything? Why would somebody that loves you do that if you hadn't actually done something to deserve it? It's so much easier to assume I must have done something terrible. I must deserve this. I must have caused this, because the only other alternative is that you're with someone who is willing to use you as a human punching bag, an emotional punching bag for no good reason. And somebody that loves you, somebody that you can trust, wouldn't do that to you. So for you to even entertain the idea that you're with an abusive person, you have to completely uproot the beliefs that have laid the foundation of this relationship. It is so much easier to just assume that you must have done something to upset this person. This must be at least partially your fault, and this must be within your control to stop. And abusers will gladly give you a whole list of reasons that you can use to blame yourself for the way they're treating you. In fact, they insist that you recognize all of these excuses you can use to excuse their behavior and to put the blame on yourself. And an abuse victim would have motives to do this. You would be motivated to blame yourself because it means that you can stop the abuse and you never have to call it abuse. You can make it your problem. You can keep control of it yourself. You can bring it to an end because it's your fault. If you can just learn how to listen better, or cook better, or clean better, or say better things, be more thoughtful in the way you talk, or dress better or talk to this person's friends better, whatever it is that you're doing that's so terrible that this person that loves you can't help but insult you and rage at you, whatever it is you're doing to deserve that, it's in your control to figure out how to stop doing that. And that's kind of comforting in a sick and twisted kind of way, because there's nothing more terrifying than to acknowledge that you are in deep with somebody that you are emotionally attached to, that you thought loved you, that you thought you could trust. You're stuck with this person in some ways. And now to realize that this person's going to keep treating you like crap no matter what you do. And it's not your fault. And therefore, there's nothing you can do to stop it. This person is never, ever going to start treating you with any basic dignity or respect, no matter what you do. That's a really terrifying prospect to accept. It's actually comforting to blame yourself as the abuse victim and to take that onto yourself, because that means that you can do something to fix it. That means that you don't have to face the reality of being with an abusive person that is never going to stop hurting you, because that means facing the reality that you were wrong about how this person felt about you, that you're probably committed to at least a certain degree, and so you're going to have to disrupt your life in some way in order to separate yourself from this person, possibly disrupt the lives of other people, like maybe children that are involved. This is not something that anybody wants to deal with. It's so much easier to just say, well, I just need to learn how to cook better, or I just need to be more thoughtful, or I just need to remember to put my shoes on the right side of the door and stop being so careless. It's all my fault. I can do this though. I can fix this. But of course, the more insidious part of this self-blame comes over time as we believe more and more with more and more abuse that we really are a huge screw up. We can't do anything right. We're constantly upsetting this loving person that we trust so much. And this brings on a level of shame onto ourselves. We start to feel like a huge failure and disappointment. No matter how hard we try, we just can't hit the mark. We just can't make this person happy. And it's not their fault. It's all our fault because we're such a screw up. And we can't make that leap into realizing and accepting that they are unreasonable and that we haven't done anything to deserve this type of treatment until we're ready to face the reality that this person doesn't really love us, that they're probably dangerous to us, and that we need to disrupt our whole lives to get ourselves into a safe place. So until we can reach that point, our self-esteem becomes weaker and weaker. We become more and more ashamed of ourselves, and that makes it harder for us to feel like we have the right to criticize this wonderful, loving person that we are upsetting so much. So that makes it even harder for us to say, this person's mistreating me. This person shouldn't talk to me like that. I deserve more respect than that. This person doesn't have the right to treat me like I don't matter. This person doesn't consider my opinion, doesn't consider my feelings, isn't listening to me, because we think, well, of course they're not listening to me. Of course they're not considering my feelings because I've made life so difficult for them. And I'm just lucky that they've stuck around this long after how much I've upset them all the time. So it becomes even harder for us to identify abuse the longer that we stay in this relationship. We might actually start to believe that we owe the abuser the right for them to treat us like crap, and that we owe it to them not to accuse them of the behavior they're engaging in because of how terrible we've come to believe that we are. By the time we come to the point in the relationship where we can no longer deny that we're being abused, we can no longer deny that something is very, very wrong with this relationship. And maybe we can no longer even deny that this person doesn't really love us, or this person means us harm. By the time we get to the point where we can no longer deny certain parts of reality, we are so far gone. We have lost our ability to trust our own judgment. We actually trust the abuser's judgment over ours. We no longer believe that we deserve to be treated with basic dignity and respect. We are convinced that it's our fault. Or we're imagining things because of how much we've been gaslighted, how much we've been manipulated into believing that we can't even remember things right. We're always forgetting things, remembering things wrong. We don't even know which way is up anymore. It takes a lot of strength and confidence for an abuse victim to stand up and say, this person is abusing me. And abuse itself corrodes that confidence from day one. It slowly corrodes that ability to stand up and identify something for what it really is. So by the time you can no longer deny that that's what it is, you don't have the confidence anymore to be able to make that judgment for yourself and really believe it yourself. This person has probably done things for us that we feel like we owe them something. We feel like we owe them something just because they've stuck around, or we might be dependent on them. Maybe we're financially dependent or emotionally dependent, or anytime we try to distance ourselves, they have ways of shaming us and making us feel guilty for wanting some space to ourselves. And this is why it's so hard for abuse victims to recognize the abuse in their own relationship. It's not because we're stupid or weak. It's because we're in a mind game that we never signed up for. Narcissistic abuse takes advantage and exploits normal human psychology. Being a normal person is what makes you susceptible to this type of abuse. Narcissists exploit normal weaknesses, normal vulnerabilities, and that's what makes us susceptible to this. Combined with a lack of education and awareness that these types of people exist. And when you combine that with the horror of the reality that you are somehow committed, at least partially, to somebody that you're emotionally attached to and dependent on, and this person is destroying your life, that's a horrifying reality. So it makes it even harder to identify an abusive relationship. We don't want to face the reality that this person is destroying us. We don't want to face the reality of what that means and what we're going to have to do if we want to take our life back. Nobody wants to face that kind of reality, that we might have to move, lose our home, lose our job, lose all our friends and family, or risk all of that, maybe risk losing our children. Nobody wants to face the reality that they're going to have to do that, and when they don't want to, in order to just get themselves into a space where they can regain their sanity. And for many of us in these types of situations, we don't know what to do. Some of us don't have a whole lot of options, or some of us are going to have to work very hard over a period of time to create options in order to allow us to escape. And some of us are so confused, we don't know what the right thing to do is. We don't know how to put ourselves into a safe space where we can regain our sanity. So it's not always clear and obvious what the solution is. And even when it is, that solution is often terrifying, horrifying, and completely overwhelming, and sometimes might seem impossible to do. And we might believe that nobody's going to believe us. Nobody's going to support us. We're going to lose the support we already have. And like I said, a lot of us feel like we don't have the right to accuse the person that's abusing us of abuse. And if we leave the relationship, a lot of us have to explain this somehow to other people. And we may be conditioned to think that we don't have the right to really tell the truth about what's happened to us. So I hope this video can provide people that haven't experienced this type of abuse a little bit of insight and explanation into why seemingly normal people can get sucked into these kinds of relationships. And I hope that there are people watching that maybe can understand themselves a little better if you were stuck in an abusive relationship, or are stuck in an abusive relationship, of how this happened to you and how it's really not your fault. This isn't something anybody signs up for. This is just part of being a normal human being whose normal human psychology was exploited and hijacked to benefit somebody that really doesn't have any empathy or any concern for the welfare of other people. So I would ask you to forgive yourself for not being able to see the signs of something that you probably didn't even realize was possible, and or something you can do if you're still feeling confused, if you're still not really sure what your situation is. A really helpful thing you can do is to look at all the things you're going through. Look at the scenarios presented and just day-to-day problems that you are living through, and imagine that those things are happening to somebody else. When things are happening to someone else, you're not emotionally invested with these preconceived notions. You're not emotionally invested in what you hope these things mean. You have a much more open mind. I know this is actually an effective way for people to get their minds out of cults, is to see something they're experiencing in the cult, to see that same type of scenario happening to somebody in a different type of cult. That can be a really effective way for a cult member to finally start to see their situation more realistically. And I think it works the same way with abuse. Imagining the things that you're experiencing, imagining them happening to somebody else, to somebody that you care about especially. How would you feel if your sibling or your friend or your adult child was being treated exactly the same way you're being treated right now? Would you somehow rationalize that and justify that? Would you be able to say, oh, well, that person's nice most of the time. Well, it's not that bad. Or would you actually be horrified at what's happening to this person that you care about? That can be a really helpful exercise to help you see what's happening to you more realistically. So remember, your opinions matter. Your feelings matter. Your judgment matters. You have every right to judge a situation you're in just as much as anyone else does. What you think about something holds just as much weight as what somebody else thinks about it. Your opinions are not less true than anybody else's. You have a right to judge your own situation for what you think it is. And if you're with someone that treats you like you don't matter, that rages at you, that's upset with you and disappointed in you all the time, even if they actually had a really good reason for that, even if you really were a huge disappointment that just couldn't get your crap together, that just couldn't learn how to listen and be considerate, why should you have to be with someone that believes that you deserve to be treated like crap? Even if you did deserve to be treated like crap, why should you have to stay with somebody that thinks they have a right to treat you that way? It doesn't matter whether or not you actually deserve it or not, and spoiler alert, you probably don't, but even if you did, don't you think that this person that's treating you like garbage has created more reasons that would justify you treating them the same way? If they have a right to treat you like crap, why wouldn't you have a right to treat them like crap after everything they've done to you, right? Like, why would you owe it to them to just sit there and let them treat you like garbage? Even if it was your fault, you have a right to leave a situation with somebody that believes that they have a right to keep hurting you, because really nobody does. No matter how flawed you've been convinced you are, no matter how broken, how backwards, how upsetting you are to other people that you've been convinced you are, I promise you, there is a person out there that will love you, that will want to be with you, that will want to treat you with basic dignity and respect. You never, ever have to stay with somebody that treats you like you don't matter or is constantly upset with you and angry with you. It's not your fault, and you don't deserve that. And I hope that this video can help you see that, can help you see your situation more clearly, and that nobody deserves this, and that it's perfectly natural to get stuck in an abusive relationship for a very long time and never be able to see it realistically. And that can be a really understandable reason of why you can stay stuck in these and how they sneak up on you. So go easy on yourself and accept the reality that you deserve a little dignity and respect. I hope this helps. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up and comment below any ideas you have for me for future videos. And don't forget to subscribe to my channel if you like this video and would like to see more like it in the future. Until next time, thanks. Bye.